بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ومولانا وحبيبنا وشفيعنا محمد النبي الأمي الأمين صلوات ربي وسلامه عليه وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين ومن دعا بدعوته واستنى بسنته واقتفى أثره إلى يوم الدين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. ربي أعوذ بك من همزات الشياطين وأعوذ بك ربي أن يحضرون. تبرأت من حولي وقوتي واعتصمت بحول الله وقوته فلا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. And welcome all to this inaugural Wednesday gathering organized by Sacred Compass. And today is, if you like, a dry run, a test run. I don't know where that music is coming from. It's very loud. It's upstairs, mashallah. I have a soundtrack to the talk today. Life is never motionless. Nobody remains stagnant. This is impossible. People are either progressing or they are regressing. People are either advancing or moving backwards. This is the nature of life, that nothing stands still. And the nature of life also is that everyone and everything actually around us is pulling us in their direction. So family pulls us in their direction. That's their nature. Colleagues and work and bosses pull us in their direction. Friends pull us in their direction. Society and culture pulls us in its direction too. And so a person finds themselves torn when they are pulled in numerous directions and requires focus. Because no particle, physics as basic principle, no single particle can move in multiple directions simultaneously. It's not possible. It can only move in one direction. And so, which direction do people move in? Well, in this life there are also many life coaches, many gurus, many people who claim that they can bring you and offer you and guide you to what you are looking for. And what people are looking for is peace. Even though they may not articulate that, they may not even think that that is actually what they're looking for. So some people try to look for peace in clubs. Some people like to look for peace on social media. Some people like to look for peace in drugs. Some people like to look for peace in alcohol. And others look for peace in spirituality, and others look for peace in physical and physical well-being and health and fitness. All of these are options and promoted. But in reality, there can only be one source of peace. And to attain that source of peace, there can only be one direction that takes you to it, and it is simply impossible for a person to map and chart their own journey. Yes, everybody has their own personal journey, but the route to the source of peace is one. The route to the source of peace is one. And so, why are we here? Most people here most of the faces are familiar faces and are aware of this. Perhaps our other halves over here have not been as fortunate to attend these gatherings for the last two or so years. But we know that for direction, people use compasses. I'm not going to give an explanation behind their name, it's quite self-evident. But compasses have traditionally been used, and until today they're still used when GPSs are not available. in order to navigate. In order to navigate. But somebody may say to you, north is the direction towards your objective. Another will say east, another will say west, another will say... And literally today people say, turn to the west. They're advanced. They are mature. They have everything that you will need. And others say, no, turn to the east. Turn to mysticism. Turn to spirituality, which makes no sense in many cases. And others will say, no, look to the north. Look to the north. Look to the liberal elites of the North, Scandinavia. Look how they're happy. The happiest nations in the world, apparently, but also the highest suicide rates, strangely enough. Yes. And so everybody pulls you in a direction. So to navigate somebody, you need to have a navigator with you, somebody who directs you. And really, that's why we are here. We're here to take direction because there is only one Sabil. There is only one tariq. Only one tariq to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala confirms that in His glorious book. He confirms that in His glorious book, where He commands His messenger saying, قُلْ هَذِهِ سَبِيلِ. Say, O Muhammad, this is my path. هَذِهِ سَبِيلِ. This is my path. This is my tariq. أَدْعُو إِلَى اللَّهِ. What is your job, O Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam? I call to Allah, I invite to Allah. This is merely an invitation. Nobody is forced here. We are here by invitation. Yes? Anyone can stay, anyone can leave. That's the exercise of the free will which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us in the first covenant. Yes? أَدْعُو إِلَى اللَّهِ عَلَى بَصِيرَةٍ. على بصيرة, upon guidance. I call to Allah upon guidance. أنا ومن تبعني. Myself and those who follow me. And so what greater honor is there than to be a follower of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam? There is no greater honor. There is no greater honor than to be a follower of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to be an heir of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to take a share of his inheritance. That's the greatest honor. And to fulfill that role. Why? To call and to direct people to Allah, to the source of peace, to As-Salam, Jalla Jalal. Yes? And to the abode of peace as well, Dar Salam. Wallahu yad'u, because what does Allah call to? Wallahu yad'u ila Dar Salam. And Allah, as He says in His glorious book, and Allah calls and invites to the abode of peace. وَيَهْدِي مَنْ يَشَاءُ إِلَى صِرَاطٍ مُسْتَقِيمٍ. And He guides whomever He wills to the straight path. So we are here every Wednesday, inshallah, up until Ramadan and after Ramadan, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala extends our lives, yes, in order to share in this guidance, what little we have learned and have been taught and have been directed to. And that's meaning it's just an exchange. It's an exchange, not an exchange of a service for some money in return, but an exchange of experiences. Yes, and we all learn from each other. But sometimes some people have something that the others don't have, and that's all that it is. It's not the superiority of anybody before you or anything like that. So as we said, today is the dry run, or the dry launch, as they say. So bear with us. Obviously, we started late. We expect, inshallah, to open the doors at 7:15 every week, and that the discourse begins at 7:30. The talk delivered by Ustadh Harun today, or by Ustadh Abdul Rahim in the future, or anybody else, will go on for about half an hour, and then Q&A, and then some dhikr, inshallah, and then some short time in order to socialize, sisters to socialize, get to know each other, brothers to get to know each other as well, inshallah. Children are welcome, and today's children are courtesy of myself, okay, so you can blame me for that noise, right? So please do bear with us as we go through the growing pains of the AV and whatnot, okay? And inshallah, with time, we'll get to the operation become seamless, inshallah, and quite easy, inshallah. So I pass over to our Ustadh Harun. For those of you who don't know, Ustadh Harun, he works in, actually I don't know what he works in. I never really understand tech or something like that. Everyone's working in tech and finance. And one of the two, take your pick, inshallah. And Ustadh Harun is a senior student of Sheikh Ahmed Al-Bab, and mashallah has studied the Islamic sciences over the years, mashallah, and will be with us. Will frequent these gatherings every now and then, as he has located outside London. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant him success, inshallah, wherever he may be, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make him fruitful and productive wherever he may be.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء مرسلين سيدنا مولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وإذا سألك عبادي أني فإني قريب. صدق الله العظيم. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا مولانا محمد واغفر لي غير الغافرين. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته والسلام علينا وعلى عباد الصالحين. أما بعد. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. So as you've heard, that this is the dry run. So typically when you dry run an event, you put the dodgiest speaker up first in case it flops. So unfortunately, you all come to listen to me, and inshallah, hopefully in the next few gatherings, things will get better. So in today's topic, one of the main themes we want to discuss as we approach the blessed month of Ramadan, we find ourselves at the doorstep in Sha'ban. Now, before we approach this subject, we first have to understand the importance of the purpose behind doing something. Now, by way of example, if you had two people, right? Two people. One is digging in the earth with his shovel, okay? That's his job. He digs in the earth in his shovel, 9 to 5, and does the same thing every single day, okay? He doesn't know why he's doing it, but he digs day in, day out. Versus a person who does the same job, who does the same hours, and he also digs in the earth with his shovel, but the difference is he knows that there's gold at the bottom, and therefore he knows why he's doing it. What's the difference between these two? What's the difference?
The one who knows digs with further.
The one who knows, he digs with further, so it affects his behavior. He knows that there's something to obtain, yes? What about anything else? Sorry?
He knows the outcome, so he's not going to give up.
He knows the outcome, so meaning that he won't give up. Excellent. So they're doing the same activity, but the only difference is one has purpose behind why he or she is doing something, the other doesn't. And so by the virtue of knowing why you do something, it changes how you do it. And it changes your approach to doing it. Yes? So similarly, we come, and every year we come to the same month, and we're told the same thing, which is about that one of the most blessed months. There are 4 blessed months in the Islamic calendar, and of those 3 come consecutively: Rajab, Sha'ban, and Ramadan. And we know that we've been told what's the unique feature of Ramadan? That you fast. It's a unique practice that you do consecutively in Ramadan. Yes. However, the act of fasting is not restricted to Ramadan. Yeah? It's not restricted to Ramadan. You can fast on Mondays, you can fast on Thursdays, you can fast on the white days. There are the obligatory fast in Ramadan, and then there is the Sunan and then the Nawafil. So my question to you is, why do we fast? Now it's over to you. Why do we fast? You can raise your voice and shout. So you put your hands up and we pick. Any ideas? Yes.
One of the 5 pillars we commanded to.
Okay, one of the 5 pillars we're commanded to. Okay, that's one explanation. That it's a, but why is it a 5 pillar? Well, my question behind that would be then why is it a 5 pillar and why are we commanded to? Yes? Sorry? To spiritual cleanse. Okay. Okay, that could be one explanation. Yes?
To attain taqwa.
To obtain taqwa. Okay. I was expecting that one.
To appreciate the qualities of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Elaborate on that.
So when you fast, you're reminded, for example, that Allah is free from need.
So when you're fasting,
You're reminded that Allah is free from need.
okay, so to appreciate the quality of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay. Anything else?
To reflect on those people that are in poor conditions that they have no choice.
Okay, to reflect and also build empathy towards those who don't have anything. Is there anything else that's been missed?
Physical benefit.
Sorry?
Physical benefit.
Physical benefits. Okay, so everybody, what you mentioned, mashallah, is good, but all of these are outcomes. Taqwa is an outcome by which you obtain from fasting, but is not the reason for fasting. As an example, you could go to work and your outcome is your objectives at work, but why you're doing it, it could be for many other reasons. So someone said spiritual cleansing. Yes, that happens as an effect of fasting, but it's not the reason why we fast. Just like reward isn't the reason to do deeds. It's an effect, it's an outcome. One of you mentioned health benefits. Well, I would say that some of us don't even get the health benefits from fasting because we end up eating more. But let's say there are definitely health benefits, but that's not the reason for fasting, yes? So what is the reason for fasting? We're still back at square one. Some have said taqwa, some have said, yes.
Allah said so.
Because Allah said so. Yes, every command, every deed is a command from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But what my question is, why? What's the reason? What's the purpose? For example, like I gave the example, the person, 2 people go to work and they're digging. They might be digging because their employer has said they have to. But there might be different motivations behind that, yes? So that's what I'm getting at. What's the why? What's the motivate? What's the purpose?
Purpose to get closer to Allah.
Closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, that's taqwa. Outcome again, yes?
To reflect the attributes of Allah.
That's an outcome still as well.
Yeah.
That's an outcome. Okay, so this is good. This is what I wanted to get to. So we seem to have dug down, and now we're getting to the spirit of fasting, what the ruh of fasting is. So the Mashaykh have said, look, all of what you mentioned are related to outcomes from fasting. Taqwa, as it's mentioned in the Quran. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that among the deeds, fasting is for me and I reward it. So it's been singled out and it's for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah mentions it very clearly. So the question is, what does it mean that fasting is for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So the Mashaykh have elaborated, they've said that fasting is an act by which you are expressing your thankfulness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in response to the abundant blessings that you've received. That's why you fast. And so they give an example. If you reflect on all of the blessings that you have received, the blessing of health, life, guidance, and the greatest among those blessings is Allah themselves, then you can't repay Allah. There's nothing you can do to repay Allah. Nothing. There's nothing you can give that is a repayment to Allah. However, the act of fasting is an act by which you are basically saying to Allah that I will, as a way of expressing love, that I will sacrifice, I will forgo anything that displeases you, and further, I will abandon anything that is even lawful just to express thankfulness. That's what fasting is. That's why fasting is for Allah, because it's not just letting go of what displeases Allah, for example, actions, backbiting, slander. But it goes further and says, even that which is lawful for you, which is food and water, you're saying, I will even forgo this right as a way of expression of love. It's a way of thanking Allah. It's a way of expressing love to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is a very, very important point, because if you look at the Sahaba, they would say they would miss the fasts that they had when it was in the dire heat. Very strange. Why would we hate it when there's long fasts and it's, you know, in the heat? We don't want to experience fast like that. Why? Because for us it's a ritual. We do it because we're told to. But if you see it from this angle, then actually the whole fast becomes very different now. Because any struggle, any difficulty only lends itself towards you thanking and expressing your love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So as a way of example to explain, one of my teachers, we went to Turkey, we traveled to Turkey, and there's this mountainous area and there's a chasm. So there's a part where the cliff drop, and then there's another piece of like land on the other side where it's the other part of the mountain. And if you fall off that drop, you're pretty much dead, okay? Unless Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saves you, right? And there's a flower that grows on the other side of this jump, and you can imagine this chasm is probably between where I'm standing and roughly where that pillar is, okay, where that back pillar is. Or probably a little bit closer, but broadly speaking, you know, roughly there. So what they were saying in Turkey is when marriage proposals are given, to express their love for their potential bride, some men, as an act of expression of love, they are told that they have to run and jump and go to the other side and pick a flower, and that flower is called negus. It's a particular type of flower. And so the person was saying that some people even put it as a condition that if you want to propose to my daughter, you have to do this. So you can imagine, like, when you're getting a proposal and the family say, if you want to marry my daughter, you have to be able to show that you can take risk. So you have to jump across, and a lot of people back out after that and say, look, you know what, I'll go with somebody, you know, less beautiful, less someone that doesn't ask this. So imagine in this circumstance, and I wish I could show a photo, but it's quite a jump. And imagine people are willing to risk their life for another person, okay? But it's the idea that it's an expression of love. Why? That you're willing to sacrifice something, you're willing to forego something. And so this is the same analogy applies to fasting, that fasting is that is that deed in which you're foregoing eating and drinking, but in the same way, because you want to express your love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, your thankfulness. It's because thankfulness is in response to receiving something. So it means that you should be in the state of shukr, meaning that understand and reflect of all of the blessings that you have, and you really appreciate that when you forego. Meaning that when you don't eat, you appreciate the basic and ni'mati of just eating and drinking. To one of the sisters mentioned that you feel what others feel. Yes, but that should increase this love, that actually you see the fast as a way of expressing your love. So this should change your whole perception of fasting, that instead of seeing fasting as a chore, that we were told to do it, and you know, the first thing you're thinking about is, well, I'm going to eat for breakfast, and then the last thing you think is, well, I'm going to eat for iftar, and that's your objective, you know, what you're eating every day. This now completely changes it to every pang of hunger, every difficulty, every challenge. In fact, you invite that because it makes it more meaningful. Why is it that, we just had Valentine's Day a couple of weeks ago, why is it people like handmade gifts? Because there's effort involved. And what is effort? It's when you're sacrificing something in exchange for something else, as opposed to just going to the shop and buying something. has no meaning, very transactional. So the same case is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that this act of fasting in itself is an act of, and a response to, love. It's an act of love. That's what fasting is, and that should change our entire perception and experience of fasting. So this Ramadan, that's something that we should bring in as an intention. Yes, that's something that we should bring in as an intention. Now, to elaborate on this point, there's a story, and I'm trying to explain this because it really gives an idea of like the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? The story is that a man and his mother, the son and his mother, they work in the palace as cleaners. And they work for the king and the sultan, and the king loves saintly people. So one day, the mother and the son, they iron clothes for the king and the prince and the princess, and they do a lot of the chores. One day, the son catches a glimpse of the daughter, meaning the princess, and he falls in love. So he starts like staring and then, elongating his job because he wants to be around the princess more, and he makes sure he irons the clothes really, really good. So she notices. And the mother's like, look, this kid is a liability because he's never going to be able to marry the girl and he's going to get us chucked out. So she tells him, stay at home. Okay, I'm not bringing you to work anymore. So over time, he stays at home. And the princess starts to realize that, hold on, my clothes aren't ironed as well and things aren't cleaned as well. And she starts to question, is there some drop in service? So she goes and visits the mother and says, is something wrong? And she says, well, yeah, I've had to leave my son at home. And she says, well, why? So she says, well, he saw you and he fell in love. That's the real reason. And I've never brought him in. And so upon hearing this, the princess becomes quite shocked, and she ends up becoming interested in the boy because she's like, I've never heard of somebody, he used to iron my clothes so nicely and now he's not there. So she became infatuated with him. But she knew that her father would never allow her to marry somebody of this class. So what she does is she hatches a plan. Okay, she says to the boy, look, my father loves this pious and saintly people. Okay, my father loves the pious and saintly people. Now, what you should do is go out and pretend to be a saintly person until you grow of such a following that my father invites you and you ask for my hand in marriage and we get married. So that's the plan, okay? Right, so he goes, okay, this is a good plan, let's go. So he reads books and he hears all these bizarre things like, these people, they live in jungles and mango in the jungle, and they set out. He's seen on the roadside doing sajda for a very long time and sitting there doing different dhikrs and all sorts. And people start to take notice because people are attracted to strange things for some reason, yes? And so he grows a little bit of a following, and then this grows over time, and he's doing these zikrs and sajdas and all sorts of things. And you could say he starts to grow a following over the years. To such an extent, now he starts to become known, okay? So imagine, he's doing this completely insincerely, completely fake, right? He's faking it. They say fake it till you make it, yeah? So he's made it, yeah? And now it's not just the common people who are coming for him. The kings are asking for him, the business people, the political elite. And just like they say fake it until you make it, he's playing the part. He's saying, no, I don't want to meet these people. These are people from the dunya. And they're even more infatuated. They're like, wow, look at this. Doesn't even want to meet us. We're the kings. So he knows how to play his cards. And lo and behold, the king of the father of the princess, he hears about this. He says, I need to meet this person. He says, look, you haven't got married and you haven't accepted any of the suitors. I'm going to go and ask for dua from this saintly person. I love the awliya, I love the friends of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he goes and he visits, and now this boy who's fully in role, he meets the king and he says, yes, how can I help? And he says, oh, I want you to make dua for me and dua for my family. And, I love the saintly people and to keep close company to. And he says, by the way, look, I have this daughter and she doesn't accept any suitor. But this idea came to mind, what if you accept a hand in marriage? So he says, he doesn't say anything and he says, I will let you know. So news goes back to the kingdom and the princess hears that the plan has worked. Right? I don't know, however many years it's taken, the plan's worked. So she comes to meet the boy, who at this point is, peer a la peer, right? And she says, look, the long plan worked, the game plan worked. Are we going to get married now? And he says, look, I don't think we are anymore. She says, what do you mean? We planned this from the start. Why not? He says, well, firstly, in the process of doing all of this, I was reading books and hearing about those who loved Allah, and I was also DIY doing it myself, trying to help others, faking it. And in the process, I've fallen in love with Allah. And he says, one thought that came to my mind was, I've been doing all of this for you. I've been doing this all for you. I've been faking it, utterly insincere. I've been saying the name of Allah for other than Allah, completely with insincerity. But in spite of that, Allah has brought all of the dunya and the kings and the fame and the name to my feet. So the thought came to mind is, imagine if I actually had a relationship with Allah. What would come to me then? If the world comes to my feet when I have an insincere relationship with Allah, what to say about having a sincere and loving relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for Allah? So I don't think I'm going to marry you. And so the Mashayikh give this and demonstrate this because this is, like we say, to fast is to forego one's lawful rights. But this is rooted in the idea that every love has a price. Every love has a price. And what differentiates a lover and the degrees of somebody's love is the price that you're willing to pay. And so fasting, and the reason why it's mandated at least in Ramadan, and we're going to touch on that later, is that fasting is that act which you are willing to not forego, just pay the price of sins and doing things like disobedient, which you shouldn't be doing anyway, but you go a step further and even forego the things that you do have a right for. And so that's what fasting is about. It's when you even forego the lawful matters. So I will leave on this note that it's mentioned in the hadith that there are two joys for the believer. There are two joys for the believer. One is when he breaks his fast. Yes? One is when he breaks his fast. And the second is in his meeting with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now it's very interesting what these two things have in common. The Mashayikh elaborate and they say that just in this life, when you break your fast, that's the moment, because when you fast, you put yourself in a state where you're in need of that food, right? You're in that dire need, yes? And when you break it, there's a sense of relief that this need that I've always wanted in that day, I quench, that thirst I quench, that hunger I quench. Yes, just because you've foregone it for so long, just because you haven't eaten for so long. But in some ways, we are also fasting from our meeting with Allah. Why? Because that is only and exclusively a person gets to see Allah for the first time in Jannah. And so this whole life is also a fast. This whole life is also a fast. And what you're fasting from is anything that Allah will be displeased with. And even those who go further than that, they fast from even things that are lawful. Because for them, that meeting is what they're preparing for. Just like we prepare for iftar and food. And so this is a second takeaway, that when we are now thinking around breaking fast, when we're eating our food, we should be thinking about what is that meeting going to be look like? What does that meeting look like? And when we start our fast, we should be thinking that, really deeply pondering on the blessings Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you, and engaging in that fast for Allah. Now we should know what for Allah means. It means that it's expressing love and thankfulness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the blessings the person has been given. So if we can take away these two things, this will completely repivot the way we even approach the act of fasting. This isn't exclusive to Ramadan, this is for any fast. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us of those who are sincere, and in our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We ask Allah azza wa jal to enable us to benefit from Sha'ban and bless us and enable us to reach the blessed month of Ramadan. In the next two gatherings, inshallah, we're going to be covering a little bit more in depth about Ramadan. So the purpose of Ramadan and the fasting within which Ramadan, what the objective is. So we've explored why you fast, the act of fasting. But now we want to know, what's the objective? What's the outcome of fasting? Yes, the why is expression of love of Allah. Yes. But what am I meant to obtain from this? What's the outcome? What's the output? And as the brothers mentioned, taqwa, we're going to be elaborating on that a lot more. As some of you have mentioned spiritual cleansing, some of you have mentioned presence and closeness of Allah. We're going to unpack these and really talk about them practically. So inshallah, without subhanakallahumma bihamdika wa nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun wa salamun alal mursalin walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. If there's any questions, inshallah, we can take them now.
I have a question. The Prophet ﷺ saw a man walking barefoot to Hajj and being carried by his two sons. And so he asked about him, and he was, and they said, oh, he had he'd made a pledge, another, to Allah, that he would walk barefoot and he would walk, he wouldn't ride. And so he said, tell him to ride and to put something on his feet. Allah is free of this. Allah did no need of this man torturing himself. So, along the, on the same vein, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not in need of us starving ourselves also during the fast. So, where do we draw the line when it comes to expressing love through self-denial?
Bismillah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So, the first place we start is denying the self from things that displease Allah. So firstly, the actions which displease Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the thoughts that displease Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, meaning the thinking, the mode of thinking like suspicion or negative thinking, the qualities in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala despises, for example, arrogance, pride, these, fasting from these. And thereafter, then you enter the realm of, okay, foregoing good lawful means. Yes? The problem is, many people start at that and forget that they're doing something that's wrong. So it's like empty expressions of love. Yes? So they're doing like a nafil act, but they haven't even done the fard. Yes? And so obviously when it comes to where do you draw the line in terms of optional things? Well, the extreme of the option is to give one's life, and that's what shaheed is. Shahid, the witnesses, yes? And they witness by giving their body. That's the price, the highest price you can pay. It's not money or time, it's your life. And so the upper echelons are the shaheed. That's why they are the people, the martyrs, because why? They paid the highest price possible. by giving and committing their entire life to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That act is a voluntary act. That not everyone's asked to do that. They're asked to be a shaheed where you at least sacrifice the sins that you do, the displeasing things that you do. Then after that, okay, then you can approach it. But that is, you ask, where do you draw that? You draw the line there. Shaheed. But you don't start there, and nor do you jump there. You first start at the basics, yes? Provided you do that, then you can start to look at that. And the reality is most people will be sitting and just getting through the acts that which bring displeasure to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, sacrificing those. Does that make sense? Yes? So to your question, how far do you go when, then obviously it's based on the person's level, the person's aptitude. Like look at Imam Hussein anhu. He didn't have to go to Karbala, he didn't have to oppose Yazid, but for him, he was willing to give up everything. Right? Why? Because he wanted to do islah of the ummah of the Prophet ﷺ. He wanted to do the correction of the ummah of the Prophet ﷺ. So for him, he was willing to. That wasn't mandated for him. Yes? So there's nothing more that you can give. Beyond that, then obviously we know like many pious people, some forego, for example, this is an amazing example. Sayyidina Abdul Qadir al-Jilani, rahmatullahi. One man, he used to, at the end of every speech, he would get up and curse Sayyidina Abdul Qadir al-Jilani. He would curse him and say, this man's a fraud, he's a fake person. And one day, this man died. And Sayyidina Abdul Qadir al-Jilani, imagine, he was the one being cursed. He went to pray that man's janazah, and he sat at the graveside of this person. And he said, oh Allah, I'm not leaving this graveside. I'm not leaving this graveside. And I'm not even going to go back to my family, going to my wife, until this person's forgiven. And it's mentioned he sat there for a day or two. And he was inspired that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him ashara. So the awliya, obviously, the higher degrees, they would even forego many, many different things. As mentioned, Ibn Taymiyyah never married. There's many examples. But to your point, where do you draw the line? It's your life. Now, whether you have to do that immediately, no, that's not the case. But it first starts with the sins and these things. Is there any other questions? Okay. Yes.
You mentioned that expressing love and thankfulness on like the wife or fasting. Should it also be the wife or any sort of action or worship that we do?
Yes. Yes. So the reason for any action is definitely for the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's exactly it, actually. So there's two types of worship. There's one which is vertical, between you and Allah. For example, salah, Sawm, fasting, yes? And that is for the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, yes? Then there's horizontal worship. What's horizontal? That's relation to you and others, people. Giving charity, smiling, helping others. Now that is also for the sake of Allah, because we say this, isn't it? I love you for the sake of Allah, I do this. But what does that mean? It means that, oh Allah, I can't feed you, I can't repay you, but I can do that with the people. So the people become a medium by which you can reflect your thankfulness and love of Allah. That's why it's irrelevant what the people do to you, because they're just a medium. And we know this from the hadith on the Day of Judgment when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, I was hungry, you did not feed me, I was ill, you did not visit me. But obviously he's not talking about Allah. Then Allah directs that, oh, my servant was hungry, my servant was ill. Meaning that you're dealing with these people, you're dealing with the creation, you're dealing with people, is your reflection with my relationship. They're not separated. Yes? So, back to your point, that is what it means to do things for Allah. It means you do it through Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Meaning you don't make the person the motive, that I want thankfulness from this person, or they need to appreciate me. No, your intention is out of the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that, if you understand that, then you can understand why the prophets and the awliya, they were able to deal with people who harmed them with goodness. Because they weren't doing it on the basis of the behavior they were receiving. They were not doing it on the basis of that person. They were doing it for Allah. And you can only truly do that when you are doing it for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Does that make sense? Is that, yes? Okay. Is there any other questions? Okay, inshallah. Well, that was the first talk of this gathering. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to enable us to improve on these gatherings and facilitate more. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك ونشهد ان لا اله الا انت نستغفرك ونتوب اليك. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. We're going to now move into the next portion of the gathering. So I'll hand it over to Sheikh Muhammad.
Jazakumullah khairan, Ustadh Harun, for that insightful reminder, nasiha. And hopefully, inshallah, we can take from what we have heard today and, inshallah, transform our fast. Not out of any piety or anything. I was fasting yesterday and the day before because I have days to make up from last Ramadan, by the way. I followed the sunnah of our mother Aisha, who used to save up her days that she owed and fast them in Sha'ban, which I think is a bad idea because I struggled during the last 2 days fasting. So now I asked me how the fast was, and I remember saying horrible, and, all of these things, I was struggling. And it was only at 5:30. So, perhaps inshallah, when we take on board this new mindset that we're fasting out of love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we can't repay Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, all we can do is give up something, then inshallah that should transform our fast into something far more meaningful, and where every pang and every headache will inshallah be transformed into a sweet feeling when one realizes that this is a small price to pay for the meeting of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where He will be pleased with us. We move on to our second segment of these gatherings, which is the dhikr. And the dhikr, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He commanded the believers to remember Him abundantly. He said, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu dhkuru Allaha dhikran kathira. Oh, you have believed, remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with much remembrance. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also said, وَاذْكُرُوا اللَّهَ كَثِيرًا لَعَلَّكُمْ تُفْلِحُونَ, and remember Allah abundantly in order for you to attain success. And this dhikr, there is no limit to the number of dhikr or the type of dhikr that a person makes. Dhikr, my dear respected brothers and sisters, is the fuel of the believer. It is what charges the believer to travel to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam passed by a group of companions and said to them, what has gathered you? And I want us to pay attention to this word, what has gathered you? And so the companions, they said, we have gathered to remember Allah and to thank Him for guiding us to Islam or Iman. And so the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, by Allah, did nothing sit you together, gather you, except this? They said, by Allah, nothing has gathered us except this. And so he said, I have not asked you to accuse you of anything. Rather, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He prides Himself before His angels due to your gathering, where you have sat to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This was not a gathering where people sat and everyone did their own individual dhikr. This was a gathering in which the companions sat to do a collective dhikr. Out of two ways, either that one person leads and the others then repeat after him, or that they repeat with the with the one who is leading the dhikr as those who gather, but then each do their own individual dhikr. This is called abath. This is chaos, and the religion is free of chaos, dear brothers and sisters. The religion is free of chaos. On the Day of Judgment, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will say, today the people will know who Ahlul Karam are, who the people of Karam, the people of pride and dignity and honor, who the people of honor are. And so the companions asked the Messenger of Allah, who are the people of honor? And he said, those who gather to remember Allah. Those who gather to remember Allah. And the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he himself sat with the companions to remember Allah. And Ibn Abbas, he said that he would not, as a young boy, like my son over here, Ibrahim, yes, he said we would not know that the jama'ah in the masjid had finished, except when we would hear the loud dhikr of the companions after the salah. And those who say, yeah, but everybody did it alone. This is, as I said, chaos. And the religion is free of chaos. Yes? Uthman radiallahu anhu, when he was the Khalifa, would sit in the masjid after Isha to teach Quran. Can you imagine the Khalifa, the head of state? And what state? After Umar radiallahu anhu. He'd taken a third of the quote-unquote civilized world. And Uthman radiallahu anhu sat there teaching Quran. And they would all repeat and say in the same time, all repeat in unison. This is our deen, dear brothers and sisters, and it has become the case that dhikr in a group has almost become entirely alien, at least to us in our immediate locality and the area or the country in which we live and have grown up. But this is in fact the sunnah of the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and the companions. And so every week we gather, as you know, many of the brothers here know, and the sisters, those who attended the retreats in the past know that we gather to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala after the reminder. The reminder is the motivation and the dhikr is the fuel. And then the work is done yourself, by yourself. Everyone has to do the work himself. Once you leave, nobody is going to do your a'mal for you. Nobody will do your worship for you. Nobody will abstain from the sins for you. Nobody will lower your own gaze, lower your own gaze. Nobody will give charity for you. It's permissible and it counts, but you must do it yourself. So we have the motivation and the fuel to then go on and to do the work for them, and then return inshallah. Yes? And so traditionally we dim the lights to aid in focus and concentration, and that is it. But that is only because we struggle to switch off from the world. We struggle to switch off. We struggle to close, when we close our eyes, to even imagine the name of Allah, or to imagine the Kaaba, or to imagine Masjid al-Nabawi. We struggle. But we can imagine the logo or the label of a designer brand. And we can imagine a car, and we can imagine a house, and we can imagine our dinner. We can imagine all of those things, yes? And so to aid in us switching off momentarily, yes, in order to focus and to be in the presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then all we do is we aid ourselves by controlling the conditions around us. So if we can control the lights, control the volume, control my children who are making noise right now, yes, this will all help, inshallah, in order for us to be present in the dhikr. And that takes me to the mindset. What should we be thinking and what thoughts should we be observing during the dhikr? First and foremost, we are to remember that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is with us. When the mashayikh were asked, where is Allah? The answer was simple. Allah is with you. Because he said, إِنَّنِي مَعَكُمَا أَسْمَعُ وَأَرَى. When he said to Musa and Harun, I am with you both. I am with you both. I hear and I see. And Allah said, وَهُوَ مَعَكُمْ أَيْنَمَا كُنْتُمْ. And he is with you wherever you may be. That ma'iyya, that presence, is not for us to understand and comprehend. How is Allah with me? I don't know. Is He with me? Yes, He is with me. But how is not for us to delve into. That burden was carried by the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Because we can't carry that burden. We're incapable of understanding that. But Allah illuminated His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam with realities that we cannot bear. So Allah is with us. He is with us. And He hears us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He hears us. He hears everything. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He hears what is a very faint sound. He hears what even the most sensitive microphones pick up, and He hears what is within the cells in our body, and He hears what is within the atoms and what is at the subatomic level. Allah Ta'ala hears everything. Jalla Jalaluhu. And He can hear the thoughts in our minds. And so when we're conscious of that, we're conscious of whose name we are uttering and invoking. And Allah Ta'ala, He sees us and He sees everything. Jalla Jalaluhu. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He sees what's in our hearts. He sees what we have experienced. He's seen our lives from birth and until death, and He sees us in this moment. He's seen our struggles. He has seen the traumas that we have experienced. He's seen the losses that we have experienced as well during our lives. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows how we feel. So when we are conscious of these, that Allah is with us, and He sees us, and He hears us, then we are more present within the dhikr, more present. And what aids to that presence as well is to imagine Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's name, to imagine His name. Because this is really what we are meant to do. Allah ta'ala calls us in the Quran to imagine. Right? There are hundreds of verses in the Quran that tell us that imagination is part of our relationship with Allah. Allah says, أَلَمْ تَرَ كَيْفَ فَعَلَ رَبُّكَ بِأَصْحَابِ الْفِيلِ. Do you not see what your Lord has done to the people of the elephant? Well, no, we didn't see. We definitely didn't see. But we're called to imagine it. Allah Ta'ala, He describes the destruction of the people of Ad and Thamud and Fir'aun and Lut. But we never saw it. There's no documentary. There are no pictures. But we are called to imagine the outcome of that thing. Allah describes Jannah for us. He describes hellfire for us. But that's for us to imagine a likeness, an approximation, not the real thing. Nobody's saying that what we are seeing is the real thing. And so we can never imagine Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We can never imagine His death, His essence, His reality, Jalla Jalaluhu. But we can imagine His signs. We can imagine His name to start with. The minimum thing to start with is His name, Jalla Jalaluhu. The alif and the lam and the ha. To imagine that. And then when we are accustomed to it, then we move on from imagining the name to imagining the named. The ism, then the musamma. Who is behind that name, Jalla Jalaluhu? But there are steps that we must take. And so, when we close our eyes, and again, closing the eyes is not a condition, but it is just to help with focus and concentration. Otherwise, we're supposed to remember Allah in every state. الَّذِينَ يَذْكُرُونَ اللَّهَ قِيَامًا وَقُعُودًا وَعَلَى جُنُوبِهِمْ. Those who remember Allah standing and sat and on their sides, lying down. Every state, we're supposed to remember Allah. Yes? Just to aid, to help in the concentration and the focus, to bring the presence, we close our eyes and we remember and we imagine the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in white light, pearly white light, bright light. And that light is descending into our chests, into our hearts, and into our minds, and filling our bodies, and our hearts are beating with every dhikr of Allah, Allah, Allah. And that nur is spreading through the blood, coursing through our blood. If we think this is something strange, know that Rasulullah said, indeed the shaitan goes through your body like blood courses through your veins. The shaitan courses through our veins. So are we not to replace him, the la'in, the cursed, with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And this is the method. When you can imagine it, it will happen. And so I'll hand over to our dear respected brother Abdullah, who will lead the dhikr and the basic etiquettes of the dhikr. is that we follow the one leading the dhikr, not to go ahead of him. You do know the dhikr, and for those who don't know, they'll become accustomed to it very quickly, inshallah. Yes? So not to go ahead of him, nor to raise your voice above his voice, but to go, you recite the dhikr in unison with him, and also to try and match the melody. And you know, the Quran is beautified with melody, and dhikr too is beautified with melody. That's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept from us. Allahumma ameen.
Test, 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 test. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. الله لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم لا تأخذه سنة ولا نوم له ما في السماوات وما في الأرض من ذا الذي يشفع عنده إلا بإذنه يعلم ما بين أيديهم وما خلفهم ولا يحيطون بشيء من علمه إلا بما شاء وسع كرسيه السماوات والأرض ولا يؤوده حفظهما وهو العلي العظيم. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. مولاي صل وسلم دائما أبدا. مولاي صل وسلم دائما أبدا على حبيبك خير الخلق كلهم. على حبيبك خير الخلق كلهم. محمد سيد الكونين والثقلين والفريقين من حرب ومن عجم. مولاي صل وسلم دائما أبدا على حبيبك خير الخلق كلهم. هو الحبيب الذي ترجى شفاعته لكل هول من الأهوال مقتهم. مولاي صل وسلم دائما أبدا على حبيبك خير الخلق كلهم. على حبيبك خير الخلق كلهم. فاعلم أنه لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله. لا إله إلا 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 الله. إلا الله 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 إلا الله. لا إله 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 إلا الله. إلا الله إلا الله إلا الله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله 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 إلا أنت المولى أنت الحق ليس المولى إلا هو أنت الهادي أنت الحق ليس الهادي إلا هو الله 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 حسبي ربي جل الله ما في قلبي غير الله حسبي ربي جل الله ما في قلبي غير الله نوري محمد صلى الله لا إله إلا 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 الله 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 لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله أستغفر الله
أستغفر الله
الذي الذي لا إله إلا هو
الذي لا إله إلا هو
الحي القيوم
الحي القيوم
وأتوب إليه أستغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو
الذي لا إله إلا
الحي القيوم
الحي القيوم
وأتوب إليه صلى الله على محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم صلى الله على محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم صلى الله على محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وهو الغفور الودود ذو العرش المجيد ذو الجلال والإكرام وهو الغفور الودود ذو العرش المجيد ذو الجلال والإكرام ذو الجلال والإكرام ذو الجلال والإكرام اللهم صل على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه وسلم اللهم صل على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه وسلم اللهم آمين. اللهم أنت السلام ومنك السلام تباركت يا ذا الجلال والإكرام يا ربنا لك الحمد كما ينبغي لجلال وجهك ولعظيم سلطانك سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله وبحمده عدد خلقه ورضا نفسه وزنة عرشه ومداد كلماته اللهم صل على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما. اللهم يا رب بجاه سيدنا محمد بن عبد الله صلى الله عليه وسلم اجمع بيننا وبين سيدنا محمد بن عبد الله في الدنيا قبل الآخرة، في الدنيا قبل الآخرة، في الدنيا قبل الآخرة، في الدنيا والآخرة. اللهم اغفر لنا واختر لنا ربنا ظلمنا أنفسنا وإن لم تغفر لنا وترحمنا لنكونن من الخاسرين. اللهم إنك عفو كريم تحب العفو فاعف عنا يا كريم. اللهم بارك لنا في شعبان وبلغنا رمضان يا أرحم الراحمين. Allah accept this inaugural gathering from us, Ya Arhamar Rahimeen. Allah accept all the intention and efforts of everyone present and everyone who could not be present, Ya Arhamar Rahimeen. Allah bless the hosts and those who have facilitated our gathering, Ya Arhamar Rahimeen. Allah make it a means of ourselves and our communities to attain your pleasure and closeness, and make it a means of benefit for us and our families and our communities, Ya Arhamar Rahimeen. Allah accept any shortcomings from us, Rabbil Alameen. Allah, when our intentions and our mindsets waver, Rabbil Alameen, forgive us and bring them back towards the right and guided path, Ya Rahman Rahim. Allah, Allah, keep us upon the footsteps of your beloved Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and your chosen and guided Mashaykh, Rabbil Alameen. Ya Akram al-Akramin, Allah, we thank you. We thank you for everything that we cannot thank you for, Ya Rahman Rahim. Allah, Allah, we thank you for the ability to thank you, Rahman Rahim. Allah, we thank you for the ability to remember when we have forgotten. Allah, Allah, do not take us in a state of heedlessness and forgetfulness, Rabbal Alameen. Allah, use us for your cause, Rahman Rahim. Allah, do not make us useless in your cause, Ya Rahman Rahim. Allah, bless all those who have passed from our families and friends in our localities. Allah, bless those who are living and guide us and protect us, our iman and our health, wealth, our honor, Ya Rahman Rahim. Allah, and the honor of the believers, Ya Rahman Rahim. Allah, have mercy upon our parents, those who have passed and those who are living, Rahman Rahim. Allah, Allah, we thank you, Ya Rabbana, lakal hamdu kama yanbaghi li jalali wajhika. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. We've gone slightly over today. Inshallah, we'll plan to finish every week at 8:45. You're free to finish the snacks and socialize amongst each other. And then we have a couple of announcements from Sheikh Muhammad. Inshallah.
So, inshallah, over the next 2 weeks, we'll be covering a two-part series titled Fasting Beyond Hunger and Thirst. The details, inshallah, will be shared on Instagram and on the WhatsApp group, the WhatsApp group. If you're not on the group, please request to be added onto the group, inshallah. And so also, if you have any questions, if you do have any questions, then please on the if you have any yes, if you do have any questions, then please ask on the groups, inshallah, and we'll facilitate an answer, inshallah, for you. We'll be sending a short and anonymous survey after the gathering in order for you to give us some of your helpful feedback, inshallah, as to how your experience was and how we can improve it, inshallah. We're here to improve. This is just, we're in our infancy, and so we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to enable us to grow, inshallah. And for any sisters who've attended by themselves, if your route back is with another sister, please try and get the train or the bus together, inshallah. And if not, we'll try and facilitate for you a means of transport like an Uber or a Bolt or something like that. We do need to vacate ASAP, so we might not have time. We don't have time. 15 minutes. We got 15 minutes إن شاء الله. طيب تقبل الله منا ومنكم. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. Naam. So Ustadh Harun is still around inshallah. If you do have any questions, you perhaps were a bit shy or embarrassed to ask in front of everybody, it can be taken privately. Ustadh Harun will be sat here at the front inshallah to take any questions.